All right, welcome back to Problem Solver Politics. I am your host, Cardinellis, with Cody the Oracle.
Hey, everybody.
And we got some big stuff going right now. Hashtag poll the people. There's all kinds of stuff that's been going on, and the DNC has reacted to the Vox Populi, to the voice of the people demanding more polls, and half said, "Nay, begone, thou peasants." And it's causing a little bit of a stir. Cody, could you tell us what's going on?
Yeah. Well, I guess so. Yeah, we'll recap a little bit. So, hashtag poll the people got trending about a week ago or 4 or 5 days ago, I guess. Basically, we'll show you guys. There has been a ridiculous lack of qualifying polls for the upcoming Democratic debate. You need 4 polls at least 5% to qualify, but they must be polls considered qualifying polls. Those have not been issued at all by anyone. So about a week ago, Poll the People started after Andrew Yang actually reached out to the DNC and asked them to increase I think he asked them to commission more polls, but the idea was, can you make it so we have a better chance of qualifying? No polls are being released. This is impossible. And as you said, the DNC basically said, go kick rocks. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to finance our own polls or anything like this. So Poll the People is a movement that got started. And here we go. Yang's top campaign officials, in addition to the candidate himself, publicly ridiculed the DNC on Twitter Monday. He offered to fund the commission polls, writing that's a small price to pay to actually see what voters are thinking at this crucial time. Now, there's not without merit for having this. This tweet's a little bit incorrect. I'll kind of clear it up. But since the last qualifying state poll was released, Kamala Harris has dropped out. Trump has been impeached. Yang was on Ellen and it was endorsed by Donald Glover. There was the December debate. There was the November debate. And then the and what he's
that is a stinging indictment.
And what he's referring to is when it comes specifically, when it comes specifically to qualifying state polls, November 18th was the last qualifying state poll date. National polls have been more recent. It's December 19th. However, as this tweet points out,
but you only need 2 of the state polls in order to get in, while you need a ton of all the national polls.
Well, also, there's been no polls at all qualifying conducted since the rules have been announced. What makes this weird as well is when they announced the qualifying period, it grandfathered in, I would say, about a month of polls on the other end, or about like another 2 weeks. Yeah. The DNC actually said to make it easier because they understand with the holidays, there'll be less polling. I believe that was in their statement. Now, the reason why I wanted to bring that up to you guys is because the DNC hasn't held their tongue completely on this. The DNC actually reached out recently to New York Times.
Oh, that's hard to believe.
We have this story. Here's
okay, but hold on, Cody, before you continue. Is that or is that not ultimate proof that the New York Times is the written propaganda arm of the DNC? If in response to an individual campaign, that's their go-to source. It's not a press release that gets picked up by the New York Times. They just march straight over there.
Hold on. Here's the other thing. If the New York Times is still the paper of record, would they not be who you would approach?
I don't think your average American considers the New York Times the paper of record.
But I would also say this
anymore.
I think that it stands more to reason that the New York Times reaches a lot of people, and that's why they went out to them, and not because they owned them. I think the New York Times is just a popular publication, and also the New York Times conducts these polls. That's the other thing you're leaving out. The reason why, I'm sorry, I kind of buried this a bit, but here we go. So DNC tells pollsters to do more polls. There hasn't been a single poll in weeks that could help the Democratic presidential candidates qualify for the next debate, and the party blames the polling organizations. I wonder why the New York Times frames it that way. Is it because the New York Times is a polling organization that's getting thrown under the bus by the DNC? Maybe. The morning after the Democrats' last debate in December, the Democratic National Committee announced the thresholds to qualify. So they're going to recap here. I've recapped through all this stuff. So this will say the 5 candidates who have already qualified did so on the basis of polling from before December 19th, which is hilarious. Literally nobody's actually qualified in this newest cycle. It's just everybody who already qualified was brought in again. And because the current polling gap has produced a series of grievances from candidates at risk of not making it, including Yang, Mr. Booker. So the DNC's response is essentially sorry, not sorry. Tom Perez, the DNC chairman, declined a request for an interview, but its spokeswoman said there had been 17 polls in the time period that qualified for the January debate, though there were 26 for the December debate and 32 for the November one. She suggested it was the fault of polling organizations, including the times that there weren't more. Quote, the DNC will not sponsor our own debate qualifying polls of presidential candidates during a primary. Also, quote, the New York Times in the expansive list of 16 qualifying poll sponsors should conduct more independent polling. So while you're getting on about how, see how the New York Times and the DNC are in bed? No, the New York Times was writing this article because the DNC basically said, why are you blaming us? Blame them. They're the ones that are running the polls. We have nothing to do with it.
But it's also stupid that the DNC says, the expansive list of 16 should do more polling, because at the end of the day, that's like asking somebody else to do free work for you that benefits your organization.
Also, the DNC controls how many polls they decide to count as qualifying polls.
So they're saying no to Rasmussen, who's actually doing polls and is reputable, and then not allowing the people that are actually polling to count their data, while simultaneously demanding that others on their approved list work for them for free. That's literally like me saying, I can't help that air quality is bad because of my factory. We should have these other air purification centers doing their stuff.
It's not free. When you get to run an article, you get to publish new poll by New York Times says. I mean, it's not free.
Well, yeah, unless if you think about it, though,
something out
from
of
a purely economic standpoint, the only reason that a news organization should be conducting a poll is if somehow it's benefiting them. If there's a story attached that's going to get lots of readers, if there's data that they need to glean for a story.
That is the problem, is that it's not news anymore. It's a business, and it's financially.
Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, the New York Times is a business. They're in the business of propagating the news.
But you're right, but they're not in the business of helping the DNC fairly decide who should be on the debate stage.
Well, exactly.
But
so
the DNC's giving them
that's
that.
why I'm saying the DNC's response is a little bit stupid. I think that the DNC needs to do one of two things. It either needs to have a very predictable and transparent schedule of all the different polls that they say they're going to qualify for, or else they just need to actually have a monthly one that is of their own, so that there's never these huge gaps where all this stuff can happen without any of the needles getting moved right before the qualifications for a debate.
I mean, it's also really important to remember this is what I wanted to highlight through here is that the way that the DNC is approaching this was kind of what bothers me about this is the way they're talking about this as if like, well, I mean, how did we know there was going to be less polls during the window that encompasses Christmas and New Year's and Hanukkah and like 3 other holidays? Like, this is not without precedent. A lot of the people that have been following polls for years, basically, I remember it was like December 20th, about then. It was actually after the December 19th poll dropped. I saw people saying, all right, look, guys, they do not conduct polls over the holidays. See you guys in a few weeks.
We made that video.
Like there's a lot of people, and it wasn't in this like, they're trying to, get these candidates out. It was just people who followed this objectively said, all right, guys, happy holidays. They really don't ever run polls. So the fact that the DNC is acting like, well, why aren't they running polls during the days of December 24th through January 5th? Like, they never will. That's never going to happen. That never has really with precedent. So It is true, less polls have been ran this cycle, I believe, than in previous cycles, so it is worse than normal. But this idea that, late December, early January leads to a severe downturn in conducted polls, I mean, if I just walked up to you on the street and said, hey, does it make sense they conduct less polls during Christmas and New Year? Most people would say, yeah, that makes sense to me. So it is weird that the DNC, because remember,
but
originally, they did say in their original statement that they extended the qualifying period further back 1 week to encompass 1 week more polls.
But you and I both agreed that seemed like just a weak attempt to blow more wind in the sails of Amy Klobuchar.
I don't know if it was only for that reason. That is what happened. I don't know if that's why they did it. But no, the larger thing is just the DNC was under the understanding that, yes, there will be less polls conducted in the coming weeks. So maybe we have to go back. So this idea now that they're like, well, why aren't these guys running more polls? It's like, I agree they should be, but at the same time, the DNC controls, the committee controls who actually polls they count. And they could say, look, you guys aren't counting enough polls. If they're truly unhappy with their list of qualifying poll sponsors, why are they not adding people to the list or not removing? You know what I mean? Like, if they are truly so unhappy with these people, where they're going to release a statement just throwing them under the bus. I love this. I love how this is hilarious, man. Because remember the context of this? New York Times reached out to Tom Perez for interview. In response, they get the New York Times of the expansive list of 16 qualifying poll sponsors should conduct more independent polling. Basically saying, this is your problem, not ours. Get away from us. We want the DNC's like, it's your problem. Because guess what? We're throwing you guys under the bus. We're going to say, we came up with our list. It's not our fault they didn't run the polls. So
I gotta
this
tell
is
you
just,
though,
it's
that-
becoming a. Well, that's the thing I want to get out because I want to hear your opinion on this. This is becoming such a ridiculous just mess. I mean, the New York Times and DNC. When we got into this, you were talking about how they own each other. The New York Times is basically slamming the DNC because the DNC slammed them. I mean,
just because they're in bed with each other doesn't mean that they don't fight like lovers.
I'm just saying, this poll the people thing is starting to kind of get out of hand now. Where people are realizing that stuff like this, like a poll hasn't been conducted since
2016.
Yeah, I mean, a state poll has not been conducted since like Canada dropped out. Like,
yeah,
what?
This smacks, and the reason why I think ultimately this is very bad for the DNC is because at the end of the day, people don't know the intricacies of who's really at fault when they hear the DNC arguing with the New York Times. The only thing they know is, holy smoke, it's been how many weeks, how many months since there's been a poll conducted, and it's the polls that determine who moves on. Are they doing to Yang what they did to Bernie again? Are they doing to Bernie again what they did in 2016? I mean, it's not just Yang's fan base that could be concerned about this. Anybody that's on the cusp or the chopping blocks fan base would be concerned about this. And at the end of the day, it looks like at best, once again, they're incompetent and don't have their crap together, or at worst, are artificially trying to thin the field by the dearth of polls that are there.
Or how about this?
Or they're just innocent, good people, and human incompetence comes through, and I shouldn't be so cranky, Cody. Is that what you're saying?
No, not at all. That's what I'm going to say, because there's a third pillar here.
Okay.
What if the DNC is not super concerned about who qualifies for this debate because they're pretty confident it's not going to happen? The New York Times even mentions in here, I think part of it just to throw shade at the DNC, but there might not be a debate if that's the impeachment trial. If the senators can't be there because there's an impeachment trial going on, I can't imagine they're going to hold a debate without
but the senators
Elizabeth
wouldn't
Warren
be allowed,
and Amy Klobuchar and Bernie Sanders.
Wait, but I do believe the senators would not be allowed to opine. If they're running for president and a presidential candidate is in the hot seat,
because they'd be jurors in a case against the sitting president.
Yeah, so I actually, from what I understand, wouldn't it be almost useless for them to show up to the actual Senate hearing because they wouldn't be allowed to say anything? They would just have to sit there and literally stay silent.
No. I mean, I'm just saying I don't want to get too far into that because I have no idea about that legal moment. Okay. I'm just saying the idea that if somebody
fact check me on that.
If impeachment picks up around January 14th, time of the debate, like I said, the DNC might be preparing to postpone or not have this debate. It is just
interesting.
It's a third or fourth option, but I'm just saying the reason why I brought it up is because I remember the New York Times added it, and then over here someone brought this up as well. The debate tracker I've been following, they're a pretty good source on this, and they mentioned at the moment the DNC does not be. Oh, sorry, they didn't mention it here. Somewhere else I saw, but just the idea that like if there is a debate, right? Because it's. I would say unlikely, but it's not outside of the realm of possibility that, I mean, what if logistically they can't have Amy Klobuchar, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren at the debate? They're just going to have Joe Biden debate Pete Buttigieg? I mean, like, maybe they'll have to postpone, and maybe that's the reason why the DNC is not super concerned about the optics of this thing, because they're like, it's going to blow over when we have to announce that the debate is postponed due to the impeachment hearing. It's just a theory out there. I just wanted to pose that because it could be they don't know what they're doing. It could be they're just like, we're comfortable with the 5 we got. We don't want anyone else. It could be that we're good with what we got.
I think it's that one.
It could also be. I'm just saying. Maybe I lean more between incompetence and that. It's incompetence that's led them there. Now they're like, you know what, man, like, I'm done. Like, let's just leave it. But it is possible that they are preparing to potentially reschedule, postpone, or cancel this January debate, which would be weird. But also remember, there is a debate every 10 days in February. Actually, I stand corrected because there's 28 days in February. There is a debate every 8 days in February. There's going to be 3 debates in February. So prepare for that. So maybe they'll do something along those lines. Perhaps even just push it back a week. It is weird. It is just, I wanted to highlight, we have gotten to the DNC and NYT fighting with each other stage of, hey, we questioned originally not Yang, but we questioned originally how the gambit would pay off, him attacking the DNC like this. He's got the New York Times fighting with him now. So obviously this one really resonated. I think the reason why it resonates is that there's a lot of things you can go up to people and say, oh, some news organization posted a graphic that was cropped weird, so there was no spot for Yang on it. People will be like, yeah, but something is like, oh, the Democrats haven't, or no polling organization registered or acknowledged by Democrats has released a poll in like over a month almost. I mean, depending, like, it's our state poll. Like, Kamala Harris dropped out since we conducted a state poll.
Yeah.
Like, that is something you can say to pretty much anyone, and they'll go, wait a minute.
Isn't it Kamala Harris and also now Julian Castro?
For the most recent ones. But remember, Harris dropped out, like, early November, mid-November. I mean, it's just, that's the kind of thing you can go up to anyone, and they'll say, hold on a minute, that sounds crazy. It
can't be considered a serious campaign if you're going that far. It can't be considered a serious campaign cycle if you're going that long, I should say, without new data.
Or it would just be, I do think it is time to start calling into question how useful are polls as a qualifying bar for debates if they just don't release them. Like it's getting to the point where I feel like it doesn't happen enough, especially in politics, where you have to start questioning how useful a system is. Just because the system had been working, is it even useful anymore? If they just don't run them. Now, I think, again, though, it's a bit of prisoner of the moment stuff. It's due to the holidays mainly, and I think there should have been more foresight about this, or at least a little bit more understanding. And maybe there was. Maybe the DNC did understand the gravity of, with the holidays and how close this next debate is, realistically, anyone not grandfathered in isn't going to make the stage. I think they might have been comfortable with that as soon as they announced the rules. Like, they might have known then, hey, these are our rules, and just realistically, yeah, probably nobody's got a shot at qualifying if they're not in already. But they've stood by it, right? It's just, it is interesting. It's just, this is where we are. And polling the people.
Okay. Well, hey, all we can do is keep saying hashtag poll the people. I'm always a fan of more data. And just like Socrates said, know thyself, and Sun Tzu said, know thy enemy, one act accomplishes both, and that is a poll. You know what I'm saying? So make sure you poll the people, and you poll them often. I have no idea how this has become a thing that a nationwide party has somehow been able to mishandle. It's beyond my producer's mind. So anyway, let us know what you guys think. If you have any additional information or opinions, please comment below. And if you can, share this video with your friends and family. Don't forget to like it and make sure that you follow us on Twitter at PSP Radio 1. This is Problem Solver Politics.